Welcome back. Now, investigators have recovered the black boxes from the passenger plane which collided with an Army helicopter in Washington, D.C.
Here to discuss what we know about the fatal crash is retired Army Corps Lieutenant Colonel Kevin Byrne and travel journalist Eoghan Corry. You're both very welcome to the show. Kevin, I'll start with you today. What can you tell us so far that we know about what happened in this air crash?
Well, the American Airlines aircraft was on a routine flight in from Kansas, and it was landing in Washington Reagan Airport, a place I have flown to myself. It's a very busy city airport. It's on the west bank of the Potomac River, which goes through Washington, D.C. And the city itself, in fact, is unusual in air traffic terms in that it's very busy with military traffic and Secret Service traffic and police traffic. And there are huge amounts of restricted and prohibited airspace around the airport. So there has to be very accurate flying in that regard, and you need special training to get in. For example, just north of the airport is the White House, and that's prohibited airspace for all sorts of reasons, as you can imagine. Also, there's a huge amount of low-level flying with helicopters for various reasons. I've seen them myself. One hovers over the Pentagon for hours on end, which is a strange thing to say at 1,500 feet. And there's all sorts of traffic to and from with VIPs and that kind of thing, and police and security. And there are routes across the city, one of which is down past the airport, down the Potomac, low-level route. Nothing unusual about that. But you must separate civil traffic coming into the airport and departing from it from the low-level traffic, and that is not what happened in the accident case.
Now, there's a report in the New York Times this morning that the air traffic controllers, there was only one on duty, and normally there's two, and that does look like it's a major factor.
If that is true, it means that I was an air traffic controller myself. When you get traffic mixes of that kind and it's overwhelming, you can lose track, in your head, basically, about what's happening like that. Normally, you have ground movements control. An airport as busy as that, they control the aircraft going to and from the gates, for example. Then they line them up on the runway, and the air traffic controller in the tower takes over. But if he or she has to work traffic as well going past the airport in that regard, would normally be, operated by somebody else, you're putting a huge amount of pressure on them at a particularly busy time of the evening.
And is it one of the most stressful jobs in existence as it is? I mean, the longevity of an air traffic controller is not terribly long, as we all know.
It's hard work when it gets to the levels that you're fully occupied in that regard. And mixing jets and helicopters low level is quite difficult, because this particular individual, if he was on his own, has to look after the departing traffic, the landing traffic, and the en route traffic, which goes past his door, so to speak, in that regard. You can easily lose track. I'm not suggesting he has. The other point I should make, though, is that, of course, all these people are highly trained. They're licensed to the appropriate standard, and any comments about them not being up to the job would not make sense, because they are licensed and they are approved to operate at that level.
Yeah, so on that, Eoghan, Trump has, of course, come out and suggested that diversity hires is to blame for the cause of this crash. What do we make of these comments? What's the reaction been to these comments?
Hostility among the aviation community. I think we can disregard everything Trump says. He's using the accident for his own political agenda. There was a debate on diversity hiring in air traffic control running prior to the presidential election. He weighed in on that, and he's jumping on an accident to push that point. There is a sort of a case that air traffic controllers and indeed pilots tend to be white and male, and there was noises that should be diversity hiring. It's a completely different debate. This was an accident waiting to happen. Very crowded airport, as Kevin has alluded to. When I flew into it first, I was absolutely shocked to see the Pentagon, the White House, all in close proximity, all that helicopter traffic. It's like running a motorway beside a primary school. You've got military operating on different radio systems. They're answering a different set of commands. And the air traffic control have one job, and that's to keep aircraft separate. That's really what everything is predicated by that. Asking people to do it by sight in a brightly lit city in the dark with all of this extra military stuff going around. It was an accident waiting to happen. What will probably come out of this, and it has to happen at some stage, they look at Ronald Reagan Airport, the viability of a city airport right next door to the White House and the Pentagon, and say, we need to move everything out. There are other alternatives. Irish people fly into Dulles when they fly over there. In 2004, for 3 years, Aer Lingus flew into another airport, BWI, Baltimore, Washington. There are other alternatives. It's a busy airport, 25 million. It's what Dublin Airport would have done about 10 years ago, but it really is in the wrong place. And what happened yesterday, tragic. Even last summer, an audit was ordered by the FAA, Mark Whittaker, on the traffic to and from Ronald Reagan because of so much military activity in the area, to see was that airspace overcrowded. The clear indication was that it was, but they still kept the airport going for their own reasons.
And Kevin, talk to us about the shape of the investigation now, Kevin, if you
Yes,
would,
indeed.
because this is very important.
First of all, the two airframes which crashed fell into the water, and now I looked into the Potomac. I didn't realise how deep it was. It's only 15 feet deep at the max in the middle like that. Now it was freezing water, but the two airframes protruded from the water because they didn't sink. You know, the water isn't that deep, and they have recovered, I understand, 2 of the black boxes. And to my surprise, I didn't realise until last evening that the black boxes, the flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder do exist for the military. They only put them in quite recently. You know, I didn't realise they'd have them. It means they can get a very good analysis of what was going on in that particular cockpit, because the pilots of the helicopter, the military helicopter, 3 crew on board, were wearing night vision goggles, which is a strange thing to do in a city. I have worn them, but they do reduce your peripheral vision quite severely, and you also lose depth perception. They're really meant for out on the countryside. In the city that is as bright as Washington, D.C., which has got freeways, it's got all sorts of obstacles, it's got flashing lights. It's an incredibly distracting thing, and they were advised by the air traffic controller behind the landing not the landing aircraft, but the jet. You know, he mentioned the jet type. How you pick out a jet type wearing night vision goggles in the dark is beyond me. It's just a shape like that. So in my opinion, and it's just an opinion earlier, I'm not trying to, find the result of an inquiry. I suspect they misidentified the traffic that was actually on final approach and identified the one behind it, which was 3 miles apart, and then went to turn, and they hit the aircraft head on, basically, in that regard.
Very tragic accident.
Very tragic.
Owen, Trump doesn't seem to be the only one spouting unsubstantiated claims. There are a lot of conspiracy theories being thrown around on the internet. How dangerous is this kind of speculation?
I would say that the conspiracy theories are sort of a fact of life in aviation. Every time there is an air crash, I mean, very few of them. We're down to about 1 commercial airliner a year crashing. We've 20 hull losses last year. We've 1 with loss of life of more than 80 now. What we've seen since the new year is when military activity gets involved. We've, missiles being fired or helicopters flying around. That's where civil aviation probably is the next hurdle for them to tackle. The conspiracy theories will increase and multiply. There's nothing to be done about it. But aviation safety has been moving so clearly and in the right direction for the last 20 years. I would expect couple of big learnings to come out of this. One of them, important ones, is aviation safety accident reports. They need to be delivered on time so that the learnings can be learned from that. 52% of the accidents since 2018. We're still waiting the safety report from them. Aviation is almost perfect, down to no crashes, but this will actually help us reach that goal, that net zero goal.
Kevin, people will be concerned on the back of this tragic accident about flying. So very briefly, can you tell us that by and large air travel is
it's incredibly safe. Yeah. And there's one statistic proves that. If you wanted to get killed on a jet traffic like the one that happened there, which was unfortunately, it's broadcast in that regard, you have to get on a jet aircraft once a day for 10,000 years before you can be guaranteed to actually die on that crash.
So that's the odds.
It's exceptionally rare.
More people die on Irish roads than in aviation accidents worldwide, by a margin of about 3 times. It's the safest way. The most dangerous part of your journey is driving to and from the airport.
We have to leave it there at the
Thanks
moment.
So much, guys.
Thank you both so much for joining us on the show. Now, lots more still to come in Ireland.